Spring football is in the books in Columbus. What is there to do now? Well, recruiting never stops. 2 commits also have made their announcements just in the last few days. We will talk that up here at Ohio State Live. So get your comments and questions in to the live chat, and we will talk Buckeyes football for the next 60 with you. Courtesy, of course, from the top. We got Kevin Noon from Buckeye Scoop, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop as well. Boy, they are blessed over there at the Scoop. And we've got Steve Hellwagon from 247 Sports, Bucknuts. Hey, guys, how we doing today?
Good.
Doing well.
Bright and sunny, blue skies here in Connecticut. I have no idea what the temperature is, but it's felt more like a second surge of winter for the last 3 or 4 days, but it's probably pushing 50s. How were you guys at the spring game? Was it fairly comfortable? It looked nice and gloomy there in Columbus.
It was a little cold.
Yeah.
It was a little cold.
Well,
yeah, it was about
here.
50 degrees, and the rain, there was rain in the morning. The rain kind of pushed away. And to be honest, the last couple of days, we've been lucky to get to 50 degrees. And now we're going to approach 60 today, then like 70 and 80 eventually by the end of the week. So springtime may finally be here in Ohio, but I'm sure there's still some days in the 40s ahead of us at some point.
80.
Yes,
Wow.
80 this weekend.
Like you said, straight to summer.
Yeah,
No in between.
that's how it usually goes.
All right, Kevin, we're going to tee up on these couple commits and, of course, want Steve and Tony to chime in as well on one wide receiver out of Florida, and Bryson Rogers. We'll start with him.
Yeah, he's out of Zephyr Hills, which is around Tampa, 6'2", $170. He is obviously, if you're able to commit at this point of the process in terms of Ohio State receiver recruiting, Brian Hartline really must like you, and his tape is very impressive. I mean, just Ohio State adding more depth to an already incredibly deep room. I mean, he had all the major offers out there, Alabama among them. Somebody who certainly has, the body control, the catch radius. I mean, he may not be the fastest guy out there, but again, we never see. Nobody reports 40 times anymore. So you're watching guys huddle tape and you're like, well, if you can pull away, that's fine. Does that mean that you're a 4.41? Does that mean you're a 4.58? I mean, we really don't know at this point. This is not Ted Ginn, but he's a bigger bodied receiver. So he's able to do, what it is that you need him to do. So, I won't get into the second commit just quite yet. I mean, just so everybody can kind of talk a little bit about Bryson Rogers. But, I think a lot of people were expecting him to kind of stay south. But the long arm of Brian Hartline knows no borders.
Steve, anything on Bryson Rogers, 6'2", 170?
Yeah, I think people got a little bit hung up on his ranking. He's number 364 in the composite, number 46 wide receiver, but he's got offers from everybody: Ohio State, Alabama, Florida, Auburn, and many others. And to go into Florida and get a guy that had those kind of offers, obviously it means a lot. And my guess is that his ranking will come around here as he goes through the process, and probably has a great senior year and does really well at all the T-shirts and shorts stuff over the summer as well. So my guess, Brian Hartline's not reaching, I don't believe. I think he's found a pretty good player. It's just I don't think that everybody's aware of this kid just yet. And perhaps in the months and weeks to come, that'll change.
Yeah, as Steve said, number 46 in the 24/7 composite. I'd just like to remind people that when Jackson Smith and Jigba committed to Ohio State, he was number 59 in the 24/7 sports composite. And so he obviously didn't stay there, ended up rising and rising and rising until he was top 5 receiver and a 5-star prospect overall. What I really like about Rogers, he's really crisp in the routes and looks like he studies the position and should pick things up pretty quickly once he gets to Ohio State. But as Kevin said, when Brian Hartline's handing him out this early and you're going to take a commit from a receiver out of state this early, this isn't a reach. This isn't a 3-star February reach where you just needed somebody to fill. Like, this is a guy that they obviously wanted. And they're not going to take a bunch. They're going to take 3, maybe 4 if they can get the 4. And so they were okay checking one off the list here with Bryson Rogers.
Smith and Jigba caught 95 last year, so 59th rated. So Tony's predicting about a 120 catch season out of Rogers here.
There's no other yeah,
Conclusion
that's exactly
to
what
make.
I'm saying. Exactly.
Absolutely.
The math is there. This is science, people.
All right, Kevin, we're going back down to Florida for Dijon Johnson, a cornerback at 6'1", 190.
Right, another guy out of Tampa, Wharton High School, somebody that kind of really emerged on the scene for Ohio State like last second, at least in terms of the people that watch it. I mean, obviously the coaching staff was very aware of him. Hats off to Tony Alford, and people will be like, why Tony Alford? Well, Florida is his recruiting territory. He builds up such great relationships there. Ohio State was able to really just kind of move in and swoop them up quickly as they were able to do the twofer at the spring game out of a pair of Tampa area players. He is a true 6'1" type of corner, and Ohio State has really shown through the years that it likes 6 foot and taller corners, and Dijon Johnson he passes the mustard on that one. If you let's get the joke out of the way there. Long arms, great ball skills. I've had a chance to really sit down and watch his tape even more than Bryson Rogers. I mean, he can lay the lumber. I mean, he's not some tentative corner out there that's just going to out technique you, but doesn't really want to sit there and drop down and hit you. He'll hit you. He seems to have really good instincts, jumps a lot of routes. I really like this commitment. And one thing I'll add too, everybody gets a little hinky about Florida commitments. Does this mean that they're going to stick, or are they just leading? I think once you kind of get north of I-4 or right around I-4, some of the craziness starts to die down a little bit. I like Ohio State being able to hold on to both of these kids.
Yeah, Dijon Johnson, to me, I think fills another need, as we've said, at cornerback. And again, Tim Walton, NFL assistant coach, now coaching the cornerbacks for Ohio State. I think that probably had a factor in this. Ohio State, Oklahoma, USC, Alabama, all offered. Ranked number 270 overall nationally, number 29 cornerback. So he is in line with some of the prospects that have been signed here in recent years by Urban Meyer and Ryan Day. Obviously, the guys in the top 100 and the top 50 and the top 25 command all the headlines, but this is a good guy for them to, quote, fill out their class and also get their positions of need covered. So I really like this pickup and everything I've heard about it. And again, this is a guy on our board here had 36 scholarship offers. So there's a lot of schools who liked him, even if maybe the recruiting analysts hadn't caught on just yet. So again, I think this is a product of COVID as well. There just wasn't a lot of FaceTime and interaction for a lot of people to see these guys in person the last couple of years. And now obviously that's changing a little bit. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it all shakes out by the time this class is signed in December.
They're going to need more than just Dijon Johnson, and at cornerback, obviously they'll take more because next year they're only going to have 5 returning scholarship corners because both corners they took in 2020 have already transferred out. The one corner that they wanted in 2019 never happened. So like there's 2 years there where there'll be no cornerbacks next year. The 4th year and 5th year guys won't be there next year. So it's all going to be 3rd year guys and under. And fortunately, looks like they grabbed 3 good ones last year in Denzel Berg, Jordan Hancock, and Ja'Kalen Johnson. We don't really know how well they did with Jair Brown and Ryan Turner. I thought Jair Brown had some good moments in the spring game, but at this point, you almost need to take more than you need just to cover up any misses that you've got. I think they feel like they've got 3 hits in that 2021 class, but there's still a long way to go to prove that they've got what they want in that 2021 and the numbers that they need to build up. Because Now you can grab as many corners as you want, because if they don't work out at corner, you can put them at safety. And this is a defense that plays 3 safeties in their base defense. So, you're going to overload in the secondary right now, because they are missing some numbers at safety and they're missing some numbers at corner. So it could be a big, large secondary class in the 2023 cycle.
Folks, this is a phenomenal Ohio State show we've got going here each and every week, 155 consecutive weeks, and I'm just amazed that these guys continue to show up. But they're here every Wednesday to talk Ohio State football with us, so I hope you appreciate what we've got going here and what these guys deliver, because I know the Buckeyes, these guys, through the roof, don't knock over my mic, just crazy, just up and down, across the board, inside and out, no Ohio State football. So we couldn't do this without Kevin Noon, Steve Hellwagon, and Tony Gerdeman, and especially Kevin, because Frank's only here for Kevin. Kevin's fantastic.
I do my best. I'm just a man. I do my best.
Steve's all right. Tony's okay. But Kevin elevates the rest of us.
I am also only here because of Kevin.
All right, whatever it takes, whatever the reason, that's all I care about. We get Steve, Tony, and Kevin each and every Wednesday, typically at 1:30 Eastern time. So be here, bring in other college football fans with you. And we will now talk a little spring football, at least what we saw at the spring game. Steve, we'll start with you. So I wrote down a list of players that stuck out to me, and most of them are no secret. Evan Pryor, Joe Royer had a nice day, but Gordon Hancock comes to mind. Kai Stokes, Dijon Johnson stood out, even though he's probably not going to see the field much. So, Steve, what was important to you?
Oh, there was a lot to like there. I think the backup quarterbacks played very well. I thought the tackling was pretty crisp in the sessions where they had full tackling. Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau stood out at defensive end. A lot of young guys got opportunities to play a lot of snaps, and they played very well. Kai Stokes, obviously at safety, he showed out pretty well. Evan Pryor running the football, I thought was outstanding. I think Mayan Williams, 101 yards for Mayan Williams in this game, just kind of showed how tough he is to get to the ground at times with his second and third efforts. So I think that there was a lot there to really, really sink your teeth into and like. Really at every position group, the new offensive line got a chance to work together. There were a couple hiccups there, so they don't go into the offseason with a big fat head thinking that they're standing on third base. They've got some things that they need to clean up, certainly. And then let's see what else. That was a lot of it, I thought. I just thought on the whole it was a bang-up effort, I thought, by all parties concerned. I don't know that I guess you didn't get the full experience of what the Jim Knowles defense is going to look like, because they kept it very vanilla. There weren't a lot of blitz packages and unique coverages and different things like that. But I thought guys made plays on the ball defensively. They didn't. There was only one turnover in the game. There were like 70 pass attempts, 6 sacks, and 1 interception out of all that. And the sack total is probably about right for both sides, offensively and defensively, what they gave up and what they were able to break through and get. You might like a little more on defense. You might like 1 fewer on offense, but not anything that troubles you too terribly. But I think from a defensive standpoint, we got to watch the student appreciation practice 2 weeks prior, and I didn't recall seeing any interceptions that day, and there was only one in this game by Cameron, don't call me George Kittle, and he tipped the ball to himself, and he's never going to play it down on defense, I wouldn't think, in the fall. So he's a walk-on. So you need those frontline defensive backs to create some turnovers. They need to get the ball out and create some fumbles on defense, but that's something they can continue to work on.
Yeah, I really like the coverage of the cornerbacks. I will say it was really windy, and it was not an ideal day to throw the football. And so you saw that in some of CJ Stroud's passes. I think they tried the back shoulder quite a bit, and it was as I've said before, like in other shows, the ball kept blowing to the front shoulder at times, and it ruined the timing for some of these guys, and the deep passes weren't necessarily there. It was fun watching Devin Brown throw it. He kind of comes in and is an aggressive thrower and can get it through that wind. Kyle McCord took what the defense gave him and had the best numbers on the day and had the best results. I think the guy that stood out most for me was Kai Stokes, especially after rewatching it. Watching it live, yeah, he definitely stands out. And then had the near interception against CJ Stroud at the end of the first half. But then you're watching it again, and you just see how around the ball he is. Denzel Burke looked as good as ever, knocking away a couple passes in coverage with Marvin Harrison. And Mark, like you said, Evan Pryor. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with him, because they do have two of the best backs in the Big Ten, and Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. And then this Evan Pryor guy, I wonder if there's a draft of Big Ten running backs, how far he's going to get before somebody snatches him up and puts him in their day one lineup.
Yeah, I'd say Tom and Tony kind of have nailed all the names right there, so there's not a lot left for me to pick on there. I agree. I had the opportunity finally to get around to watching it off the DVR, and Kai Stokes does jump off the tape a little bit. You see now why he was the first true freshman to lose his black stripe in the process. I really think that Evan Pryor is somebody that showed me a thing or two. Again, where does he stand in the rotation in terms of, Travion Henderson's going to be the guy. You saw what, Mayan Williams is able to do. But, with Marcus Crowley looking like it could be a longer-term absence, and then you bring in a young guy like Dallin Hayden, the opportunity is there for Evan Pryor. I really like what I saw out of Jordan Hancock. There was a big question going in between Jordan Hancock and Jalen Johnson. Will one of them have a better day than the other? I'm not going to say that Jalen Johnson had a bad day, but I'm going to say Jordan Hancock had a good day. I think that he's kind of emerging as maybe that next corner for Ohio State. But that's, again, I'm not saying that Jalen Johnson can't be there. We saw one scrimmage, in its entirety, as opposed to the remainder of the spring practice session. So, you have to remember everything you see is isolated in a one game window. I think there were some guys on the defensive line that had their moments. JT Tuimoloau, I think, is just going to be a freak. I mean, obviously Jack Sawyer had his moments too. I'm just going to be Caden Curry is somebody that flashed a couple of times. I'd like to give him a little special mention. I think Caden Curry did a lot right there, but I mean, he's still going to be somebody that he's not going to get taller. So, I mean, he's just going to have to do it, with strength and technique. And I think both those things will come in time.
I do want to address one thing here from Frank asking if there's a Chase Young caliber on this team. No, don't look for Chase Youngs or Joey Bosa's or Nick Bosa's. Look for, because those guys are the best that have ever played at Ohio State in terms of pass rushers. So don't expect that every year. Ask yourself, is there a Sam Hubbard? Is there a Tyquan Lewis, defensive lineman of the year type on this team? And then that's something that is attainable. Don't be disappointed when you can't find another Chase Young or another Bosa, because those guys, they've only come from two families ever. So, and I don't think those families are producing any more children.
All right. I believe Denzel Ward is the wealthiest cornerback in the history of the NFL now, and Yakov 22 would like to add to that total and probably throw in a question for Steve about Night Train Lane or somebody. I don't know.
Where does Denzel Ward rank somewhere between Hanford Dixon and Frank Minifield there, Steve?
Well, I'd like to see him healthy on the field, for God's sake. I don't think he's played a full season yet. And they're as Kevin and I's good friends, Terry Gilliam once said, you're giving him the treat and he ain't performed the trick. So, I guess I'd like to see that first before we anoint him the greatest corner in the history of the sport. But he's very good. But again, I want to see him play like 19 games one year. 20
17,
games.
Yeah, 20 would be
20.
good. Yep.
20 games.
Yeah. He can match those Bengals corners who got to play 20. What, Eli Apple and
They got to play 21 because then they played
21? Yeah, they had to play the extra
first
playoff
NFL
game.
team to play 21 games.
That's right. They did it the hard way.
Play 20 games like LeBron.
Still 20 games, right? That's okay. David's asking, others have asked, Tony hit on this. Yeah, we saw Evan Pryor on display. It was impressive. Nobody should be surprised by that. Is there a drawback to getting him heavily into the mix, especially since most of the games are, I don't want to say check, win, but if you're going to get that's a Steve deal right there. How many rushing attempts in a typical Ohio State offensive game that they've got control of most of the game? They're going to run it 35 times, something in that range.
35 or 40, and then probably 25 passes, something like that. But it varies, depends on how the game's going. It could be 30 passes and 35 runs or something like that. Maybe it just depends. Just depends how the game's going. I mean, it could be skewed entirely toward the pass if they're losing, but we've seen that obviously where they completely abandon the run in some of these games. I think there's plenty of work for Travion Henderson, Evan Pryor, and Mayan Williams. They needed 3 guys last year to get through a 13-game season, and there were games where each of Master Teague, Mayan Williams, and Travion Henderson had in excess of 15, pushing 20 carries. And so I think, it takes a village to get through a long season like this. And, Travion Henderson will probably miss a game somewhere in there, as bad as it is to say that. So when that happens, you definitely need those other 2 guys. So, running backs get dinged up. It does tend to happen. So they want to keep him healthy above all else. But what to me was good, not only was Pryor outstanding running the ball, but he also caught 4 passes for right around 40 yards or thereabouts as well. So he showed he can take it coming out of the backfield. Coach Day said he liked this wiggle where, he makes a guy miss. I think he was the one that made Mitchell Melton miss at the line of scrimmage and then broke outside and went down the sideline for about 25 or 30 yards. So he's got some stuff in his game. And, I think a lot of fans came away from that game saying this guy needs to play more. But Mayan did not take a backseat to anybody. He did outstanding just as well. And we know how good Travion Henderson is. So I think you got 3 frontline backs, 3 guys who'd play for just about anybody. And it's a great problem for Tony Alford and Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day to have.
Yeah, you look at last year, and I think it was about 33 attempts per game. You go back, you skip 20 because it was a weird season in numbers or whatever, but you go back to 19, it was 47.4 carries per game for Ohio State. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on, what's the passing game looking like, what do you have available in terms of running backs. So I don't think we're going to see 33 carries. I don't think we're going to see 47 carries. I think we're going to see something, I think 35, 36 is going to be safe. If Ohio State is going to get into a position where a lot of people on this channel believe that it is and win a lot of games in the first half, there's going to be opportunity as they save the tread on Trevion's tires for guys to get in there and play some meaningful snaps, maybe even in the late first half, to be honest. I don't think Evan Pryor is quite to the point of where he's looking directly across at Mayan Williams, but I think he made some huge strides in there because I think there were people that questioned if Evan Pryor was going to ever be able to develop a college football body, because we remember him getting blown up on a blocking assignment in year 1, and that was kind of the end of that experiment. It's like, all right, well, we're definitely redshirting you at this point. I'm not going to come out there and say that he looks like a whole different person, but he's much more stout, and I think he's much better equipped to be able to see some meaningful minutes, and they can't redshirt him again. So you got him, use him.
Yeah, and as all the coaches have said, if they're good enough to play, you owe it to them to play them. And so that's where Evan Pryor is. I don't think he's the backup but I think there are things that he can do that Mayan Williams can't. And so you just need to put those into the game plan if he shows that he's worthy of it.
Am I making too much out of a couple jump cuts that I saw Mayan Williams make? Based on him logging his, whatever it was, 10 carries a couple of years ago and whatever he got in 21, I had a different thought process, not necessarily that he was Master Teague, that everything's straight ahead, but he looked a little sleeker, a little quicker, a little faster to me.
I think one of the things I like about him is a lot like Maurice Clarett in 2002. Like he can make that first guy miss that gets into the backfield or is right at the line of scrimmage. He makes that guy miss a lot, and he has that initial quickness, and he's not the fastest guy. He'll get caught from behind, but as long as he gets 30 yards in between the snap and the tackle, I think you're going to take it. And that's why I think he's a really good back. I think he can definitely start at Ohio State, as he did twice last year, and he'll get just about every yard that's out there for you and that he can get. And so I think that's valuable, as Day just wants them to stay ahead of the chains, and those 3-yard runs, he wants to get 5 out of them, and the ones at the line that you get hit at the line of scrimmage, get 2 out of them, and just keep the chains moving that way. On those 3rd and shorts, you can do whatever you want. You can go right back to the run if you want.
You can talk college football with us all the time. We've got a Discord. What is that? Well, it's just a big chat room. So join us on Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV. I send you a link and you can join us on Discord. I will also be posting schedule previews of any team that you'd like per request on Patreon as well. Treasure the Torah. Thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate that. What's up, fellas? I was just wondering, for the first game of the season against Notre Dame, depending on how that goes, what to expect something similar to the 10-2 season last year. Well, we hope not.
Yeah, 10-2 is not going to be smiled upon around these parts. I think I've seen a lot of the futures site saying that, Ohio State 11, and, generally you don't see 12 as a number out there because, things do happen. But I think 10-2 would be a disappointment. I mean, to be honest, Ryan Day goes in, shuffles the coaching staff up. 10-2 means that either, there are a lot of things I don't want to speak into existence. You're doing this without some key pieces, or the defense just wasn't able to do it, or I don't know. But I would still sit there and say that the belief amongst generally all of the observers is that this, kind of 11-1 is kind of the tipping point. And then, where does it go from there? And that's not necessarily identifying one game over another as being the one that they could stumble, because honestly, we've seen the years where nobody was going in saying Iowa or Purdue necessarily, other than the people that just look at the schedule and say, well, that's the one road game that doesn't make sense to me, so therefore I'm going to call it a trap game. That's my view.
Yeah, you look at the schedule, and they're going to be at least 9-point favorites in every game until they lose one and things get adjusted. So they're going to be favored in every game, so they should win every game. But it doesn't actually always turn out to be what actually happens. So I think, 10-2 would be bad. And as Ryan Day said, this spring, you're not allowed to lose games at Ohio State. Certainly not allowed to lose 2. And if you do it too many times, you're not going to get fired for it, but you might get fired for that rare 3-loss season that pops up. Because if you can lose 2, you can lose 3. But I'm thinking I'd be much less surprised to see 11-1 than a 10-2, and I'd probably be more surprised to see 10-2 than 12-0.
Yeah, when you're picked top 2 going into the season, you don't make the playoff and don't play for the national championship, don't win the Big Ten, don't beat Michigan, then those are all problems. So that's the predicament they're in right now. They have no wiggle room. They have no margin for error. They need to go 13-0. And, that's just the way it is. When you have I say he's once a generation quarterback with CJ Stroud, but he's really not all that much different or better than Haskins and Fields. They were all great players. But when you have that kind of player and don't capitalize on it and at least win the Big Ten, beat Michigan, and get to the playoff, and, with Fields, they did win one playoff game, which was good. Then you have underachieved, I think. You can't stack top 5 class, top 4, top 3 class on top of another and not play for the national championship, occasionally. So, granted, they did do that in 2020, and I think people are looking for it to happen again in 2022.
I thought they won 2 playoff games with Fields. No, okay. That's right.
No, they were 0-1.
Yeah.
They had Clemson on the ropes. And
yeah, that's right.
And, yeah.
Something
Bad reffing.
that one. Okay. We'll go next to Sue, who's wondering about this defensive end rotation. Zach Harrison's got the seniority. Will he be the first teamer? Of course, we've got the 2 studs as now sophomores. Will seniority play into who starts?
I got this. Jim Knowles, quoted after the game, said, "No one asked me about this, but just so you know, I don't care who starts." So I think you got your answer there. It doesn't matter who starts the game. It's who plays the most plays, and it's who makes the most plays, and it's who's in the game to play in the fourth quarter when the game is on the line. Remember those 3 things: who plays the most plays, who makes the most plays, and when the game is on the line, it's tied, you're down 3 or you're up 3 in the last 5 minutes, who's on the field? Who have the coaches put their most trust in to land the plane and bring it home? And that's when you'll have your answer over who the coaches truly think are the best players. That's why the play counts in a lot of these games, at least in half the games that are competitive, mean something. I think in a game like Toledo or Arkansas State, the play count really doesn't mean a whole lot because typically maybe some of your younger guys will get a few more plays than they normally would. But coming all the way around the bend, people were outraged when they saw Zach Harrison and Javonte Jean-Baptiste out there with the first team on Saturday, as well as Teron Vincent and Jerron Cage. You had, I think, what would that be? 4 seniors, I guess, starting across there on the defensive line, and people, were jumping off the Lane Avenue Bridge. And when JT Tuamaloau and Jack Sawyer got in the game, boy, did the tempo change. The temperature got ratcheted up a notch or 2. So that's what you want to see is those young guys are hungry. They're pushing the older guys, and they will play. They will play. There are no sacred cows. Starting a game, Larry Johnson is historic for this. I think he tells his guys on Monday or Tuesday, whoever works the hardest this week will start on Saturday. And it's been crazy some weeks to see some of the randoms that he has started a game with on the defensive line. Guys who are like, this guy hasn't made a play in a month, but he must have gone out there during the course of the week and just lit it up. And Larry Johnson said, this guy's starting this week. So, all this, everyone's worried about the 2 deep and the starting lineup and this, that, or the other. Just remember the 3 things I said at the top of this rant. The guys who play the most plays, the guys who make the most plays, and the guys who are in the game when you're up 3 or down 3 with 5 minutes to go. Those are the only 3 things that matter.
Yeah, just quickly. So often we think starter and first team are synonymous, and that they really aren't. I mean, it just who's out there for the first play doesn't matter. The way we see wholesale changes in terms of personnel and subbing on almost every play, it's not like you're bringing guys. This isn't like the old days of football where you played both ways and you weren't coming off the field because of the way that substitution rules are. I mean, you could see changes and then you could see more changes before the play is even snapped. I mean, so don't get too caught up in the designation of starter because that really doesn't mean much. And Steve is absolutely right that, I mean, I think then you can go in and look at snap counts and then maybe get a little bit of fool's gold there too, because things sometimes can be situational. I mean, obviously, a game that gets out of hand, you're just not going to burn, some of your guys out too much. You're gonna empty your bench and get a lot of guys some opportunities out there. So you just have to really kind of look at what the performance is and kind of extrapolate from that more so than looking at who has the biggest number after their name on snap counts, or who's out there on an arbitrary first play of the game.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just what they want to do with the defense that first series, like it is when they open up offense with two tight ends, meaning like one of Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, or Jackson Smith-Njigba are sitting. It's just what they want to do at the outset, and the guys that they have that do it best. And I always use the Nick Bosa example. He was a sophomore All-American at Ohio State, and he started 7 games as a sophomore. But he obviously played as much as anybody, and it's not about like Ohio State has 4 or 5 starting defensive ends. We'll see by the end of the year what it is, and 4 starting defensive tackles that may grow to 11 to 5 or 6 or whatever. It's just a group, and you rotate them in, and you go from there, and you hope you have more than you can use. Now, I do, as Sue was mentioning, just the seniority of starting, like, maybe it's one of those things as well where, we saw at Rutgers, we saw Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Tyler Friday get starters because they're New Jersey guys. And so maybe sometimes there are some nods there to just that 1 week thing. But then again, you start and then you only play 18 plays. It's pretty obvious who the best players are. And it's really difficult to watch JT Tuimoloau and Zach Harrison and Jack Sawyer play on the same field that Zach Harrison and Javonte Jean-Baptiste are. And you see which of them gets to the quarterback, even in a spring scrimmage type of thing, and which don't. And I keep saying, I think these young guys are really, really pushing the seniors, and seniors better be careful.
I think back to watching that Georgia defense last season, and they had the one letdown in the SEC championship game, and they made amends for it. But otherwise, they were just unlike anything we've seen in 10 or 15 years. And right out of the gate against Clemson, and then against a really good Arkansas offense that scored 51 points the next week against Ole Miss and finished in the top 15 in the country, that they were just consistently just living in the other side of the backfield, and they just direct plays. They just didn't even allow offenses to run plays. They were just throwing guards in the laps of the running backs. And if this defensive front for Ohio State can play to its potential, they could just wreck offenses, and it could be something to behold if they come close to their potential. And then the other thing I saw, and I don't want to make too much of it on Saturday, but Steve made a comment about guys breaking on the football in the defensive backfield. It just seems that the secondary has been so passive in recent years that they just concede that the other team's going to play pitch and catch, and they just need to make tackles. Where, again, I don't want to make too much out of what we saw on Saturday, but it just seemed guys were breaking on the ball, looking to make plays, had better ball skills, were more aware of where the ball was, and again, making plays on the ball.
It looked like a real defense.
Yeah, like a real defense. Like, we want to stop the offense, not just hope they make a mistake at some point. And, All right. Terry, appreciate the super chat contribution. Thank you so much for that. Does Jaden Ballard transfer out?
No, I'll jump on real quick and say I don't think so, because even this spring, when talking about his plans for this year, he said he wanted to earn a role on special teams, and that was the focus. So clearly, he's not been a wide receiver for long. He's a basketball player who turned to football, so he understands that there's going to be some process here. So no, I don't expect him to transfer at this point. He's just a redshirt freshman, so he'll get some opportunities this year. Is he the sixth guy? I don't know. He might have to beat out walk on Xavier Johnson for that to be that sixth guy right now, or one of the freshmen. But they love his talent. He's 6'3", 195 right now, and has all of the athleticism you would ever want from a Z receiver. And he's also big and fast. And so, I think he's fine. He's patient. Whenever you see him, he's always got a big smile, and that's always a good key, a good sign when you're looking at prospective transfers. And I don't think they need to lose anybody in the receiver room to get down to 85 or anything like that. There are other rooms that will take care of that.
Right, and he's an Ohio kid too, so I think that's going to buy a little bit more time of, even if he was a basketball guy, I mean, he's in Massillon. I mean, he's very aware of what Ohio State athletics are about. I think, if he were an out-of-state guy, maybe you could see him getting maybe a little more impatient. But as Tony said, I mean, he's still pretty early in his process. So I don't think that anybody on the staff is going to have to sit him down and have a hard conversation about him about, I don't know if your opportunity is here. He has time. He has the talent. He just happens to be in a generational type of room over the last couple of years that just isn't necessarily getting any easier. But as he adds to his own arsenal of weapons and abilities, he's going to be able to stake more of a claim, I believe.
Yeah, I don't foresee him leaving anytime soon. I don't think he played particularly that great on Saturday. He had a couple 50-50 balls that he needs to come down with that for whatever reason he didn't come down with. I don't know if they were straight drops or the DBs made great plays on them. My vantage point was from our perch in the press box about 15 stories up in the air, so it was kind of hard to gauge a lot of times what was going on down there. But he had a couple balls in his direction that he didn't come down with that I know he had to be kicking himself at least a little bit about, because he's in a battle. Let's just put it out there. He's in a battle for playing time. And Harrison, Egbuka, and Smith-Njigba are going to play and play a lot. Last year we saw Smith-Njigba, Wilson, and Olave play probably 80% of the snaps, and the rest of them got the scraps, So if they go the same route this year with the top three, that doesn't leave a whole lot out there for Fleming or for Ballard or for the freshman or Cam Babb or whoever else. So I'm not sure that they are at that point yet with Harrison and Egbuka to say, they're worthy of playing 80% of the snaps. But Fleming and Babb and Ballard are in a very, very tough battle right now. They're swimming upstream trying to steal some snaps from somebody. And that's just the fact of the matter. And Brian Hartline's not going to put them out there out of courtesy or, out of sympathy or, just for the goodness of his heart. They're playing the guys who are going to help him win the national championship. So, got to work up. And I think Ballard has gotten to this point. I think he's going to have to continue to work hard on what he's doing and make plays when he's given the opportunity, because there were a couple he left out there on the field, I thought, on Saturday.
Yeah, he had some go through his hands. I just went and looked back. Marvin Harrison played one snap against Oregon. Emeka Egbuka played only on special teams, to give you an idea of where they were at the start of the season to what they became, and the lack of ability to trust them early on to what they eventually became. And you could see the same thing early in the season where it's just four guys, I think, with Fleming and in there as well, where it's those guys and other people are going to have to work their way in, and it's not going to be given to them.
This edition of Ohio State Buckeyes Live brought to you by Treasure the Torah. Thank you so much for the contribution. Appreciate that so much. You're absolutely right. It was a bad call from the refs on the fumble. This is in the Clemson game in the playoffs, but I do not think Ohio State will make the playoffs this year. It's just so important that the Buckeyes really fix their defense. Peace to my boy, Kevin, and Tony.
Tom,
if you missed it.
Tora is a frequent viewer of the Buckeye Weekly podcast that we do, and Tom is on there, and so thank you for that. First off, Mark, you said Treasure does not think Ohio State will make the playoffs. You threw a not in there, and I didn't want to besmirch his views on the Buckeyes there.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's the defense. I think we would all agree it's the defense that has held them back. And they just spent what, I don't know, $4 million to fix it in the offseason.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing too is it's funny because I was reading on social media and there was some Notre Dame writer, podcaster, I don't really know who he is, who came away from watching the Ohio State spring game very unimpressed with the defense and said they were going to be just as bad as last year. And I mean, let's not forget that they ran completely, they didn't blitz, they, completely vanilla, no disguising or anything like that. And watching it point blank, I thought that the defense, I mean, again, we're watching stuff at about 75% speed. I mean, it's not, rip the brakes out of the car and let's go. But the defense looked a lot better just there in terms of everybody seemed to kind of know what it was they were supposed to do. And again, they're so early in install. So the defense is going to be fixed. I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to, I don't think anybody should have this expectations that it's suddenly going to be a top 10 defense like Jim Knowles' defense was last year at Oklahoma State right off the bat. It took a couple of years for them to get there. But the good thing is that Jim Knowles was doing that with 2 and 3 stars. At Ohio State's going to be doing it with 4 and 5 stars. And Jim Knowles also was able to bring a lot of his support staff over with him. So it's not necessarily like Jim Knowles is going to have hands-on with everybody to be able to make sure they understand. I mean, they've got other guys in, Clay McFarland, some other guys that are going to be able to work with position groups to make sure they're understanding it. And I think that's going to be able to help them with the acceleration into 22.
Based on what I try to accomplish here, especially on our main channel, Voice of College Football, to be as neutral and unbiased as possible, and I readily admit I am not neutral and unbiased, no human is, but I try to be as much as I possibly can. I hated that Ohio State was involved in 2 of the more controversially officiated games of the past 20 years in the playoffs and championship games, but I'm going to call it like I see it. And I wish some other team was involved. Because I believe that I'm taking it from an unbiased standpoint that Clemson won the game. Ohio State lost the game. Absolutely. Clemson should not have to apologize for that playoff win. They didn't make the calls. As far as what I know throughout the course of football history, the players line up where the officials tell them to. There's no rebellion or mutiny. They don't do whatever they want. They line up and play the next play regardless of how good or bad the call is. So Clemson shouldn't have to take any kind of responsibility for it. The officials made the calls. I think one was an atrocious call. The other 2 were highly questionable. They all went against Ohio State. Could Ohio State have overcome those and still won the game? Yes, Clemson made the plays in the 4th quarter, but Ohio State, the officiating was pretty awful in that game, and it cost Ohio State. Did it cost them the win? I don't know, but it cost them dearly. All right. Buyers Vacation Rentals. Appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the super chat as well. This char probably won't make it to the screen. I'm glad I pulled off the upset there. Thank you, buyers. But a lot of non-starting receivers looked terrible. A lot of one-on-one battles lost.
Yeah, freshman Caleb Burton was the receiver on the interception where he didn't really do anything to break that up. But he also had another one where he was running free and got very wide open on a deep pass that didn't get to him. But yeah, that's why they're non-starters, and it's only spring. Are they playing next weekend? Is there a game next weekend? I'm not sure. I have to check the schedule. I don't believe the regular season starts for a little bit longer yet. But I mean, the non-starting receivers are just freshmen and walk-ons at this point because they didn't have Julian Fleming, and we talked about Jaden Ballard's a redshirt freshman, and yeah, he had some issues with his hands, but again, he's young, and everybody else is young or walk-on, and so what do you expect? Not everybody is Garrett Wilson or Jackson Smith and Jigba as freshmen, not even Emeka Ibuka or Marvin Harrison in the spring.
Right, and you got to remember too, they're running a lot of base stuff out there. There's not a lot of pizzazz, And by the way, too, they're not necessarily hooking up with C.J. Stroud there, who is going to be the quarterback this year. Not Devin Brown, not Kyle McCord. It's going to be C.J. Stroud. So there's a lot there, and it's just kind of a easy comment to make to say, well, this guy was targeted 6 times and made 2 receptions, and this guy did this or that. But I think if you sit there and you really kind of peel back the layers, it's you can't go and watch a spring game and predict doom and gloom, and you just can't watch a spring game and say, well, everything's hunky dory and completely fixed. You have to frame everything properly. So I think this takes a little bit more framing.
I am enjoying the Michael Campbell. Also, him I believe on Twitter he was celebrating the Notre Dame's recruiting title for 2023, and doing that in April is a lot like Michigan celebrating their September Heismans. It's all meaningless, and if you're celebrating a recruiting title in April, it's because you've never paid attention to recruiting in your life, because it's not until October, November, December where the SEC comes in and is like, yeah, we're going to take this guy and this guy and this guy, and we'll take one of yours and we'll take 2 of yours. And so I guess celebrate it while you can.
If they're celebrating it.
How takes Keon Keeley, or anybody takes Keon Keeley out of Notre Dame, we may have to put out a wellness check for Michael, because that's going to hurt.
If they're celebrating at Notre Dame, then they're probably tipping cars or probably cows in Lubbock, Texas, because Texas Tech is number 2 right now. Don't think that's going to hold. So.
Well, and really, it's just amazing that Notre Dame can find so many scholar athletes that are willing to, that have already qualified to enroll in Notre Dame, because we know how difficult it is for Notre Dame to recruit with their high academic standards.
And Texas Tech being number 2 right now is a matter of they have 15 commitments. So all those nickels and dimes start to add up after a while in terms of recruiting points. Just wait until everybody else starts to kind of fill in.
Do appreciate all these Notre Dame fans jumping in here. D-Rock Irish is here all the time, but they've made it their way to the Ohio State channel from our main channel, I guess. So thanks for being here. Appreciate that. We've got a conversation coming up with Brian Driscoll from Irish Breakdown this afternoon, so we will post that soon, because Notre Dame's got its spring game coming up on the Peacock Network. Yes, this Saturday. All right. And one thing, not to backtrack, but yes, I will backtrack. So I do intend to backtrack. When it was stated by somebody that it was okay for Ohio State to go 10-2 or something that was reasonable or acceptable, we had a conversation on our Michigan show last week or the week before, and it was stated by one of our hosts, Dre, also Michigan fan, that basically he was okay with a 9-3 season this year. He thought, okay, we've lost all this talent. We've lost maybe potential 3 first-round picks. We're, 9-3 would be okay. I wouldn't be celebrating, but it would be okay. And then later in the show, he mentioned that Ohio State's and Michigan's expectations were similar. And I went, whoa, we've got a disconnect here, because you told me 10 minutes ago that you were okay with 9-3. There's not an Ohio State fan on the planet that's satisfied with 9-3. 10-2, not satisfied with 10-2. It's we win the Big Ten championship, and basically that enters us into the playoff, and that's what it's got to be.
Michigan has 3 toss-up games this year. 2 of them are at home with Penn State and Michigan State. The third is at Iowa, and if they go 9-3 with 3 toss-up games, that's a bad year. It's a disappointing year.
Schedule. Absolutely.
Yeah, if they lose more than 3 games, that means they lost all the toss-ups and then managed to lose one that they most certainly should have won. Their schedule is not as challenging as some other teams out there. Just put it that way.
Hellfresh, appreciate the contribution. Thank you so much for that. Spring game is a lose-lose if DBs whatever. They do well, then the wide receivers suck. If the wide receivers do well, then the DBs suck. Offensive line does well, defensive line sucks, so forth and so on. I would say that it's a pretty simple conclusion, though, that the wide receiver defensive back matchup seems to be the easiest to evaluate and the closest in a spring game to what the regular season is. Just that one-on-one matchup in space, to me.
And that's what Ryan Day said. He was looking forward to watching that and the defensive ends and offensive tackles. Like those were the one-on-one matchups he was looking forward to watching in the spring. And he got that. And that's what I really enjoyed watching the corners, because I thought they played pretty well in that game. And they were there knocking the balls away and also supporting the run.
Yeah, I thought there was plenty to like on the defensive side of the ball. They've made some progress, and now we'll see how they pull it together, in the fall. I'm interested, intrigued. I like what I've seen so far. I want to see more. So guess it's worth tuning in this fall to see how the story will go.
Yeah, the long wait begins before we get to see them on the field doing something and getting into fall camp, and then obviously opening up the season against Notre Dame. People will wear out their copies of the spring game and overanalyze every single little thing that they see there. And I guarantee you that 10 people could watch one play and there could be 12 different opinions that come out of it. And that's, part of the beauty of the sport and part of the reason why we're able to do this and talk about this and have, so many great people associated, because let's be honest, it's better than real life.
Absolutely to that. Any word on Mitchell Milton, of course, injured in the spring game? Excuse me. So, Steve, you had mentioned earlier in the chat, no additional word there.
No, nothing there. I guess it was a non-contact injury, which you hate to see that, obviously, because it could be a sprain or a tear or something along those lines that just take a bad step and you never know what happens. So I guess we're waiting for a post-spring debrief with Coach Day, probably in a couple of weeks. They're all out on the road recruiting right now. So I guess when those guys are done with their on-the-road recruiting, we will have a chance to sit down with Coach Day and a few of the assistant coaches and hopefully get a final verdict from them on what they liked, what they didn't like, what's still out there to improve on, and any injury updates as well.
All right, tons of questions and comments. We will save them for another week. We appreciate everybody being here. Come on back next week and save your comments and questions and bring them on back. And I have successfully pushed off the rest of my Big Ten coaches rankings, and Kevin coming down on me for my PJ Fleck ranking. So I've successfully averted that for another week. All right, Kevin, let folks know where you are.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. I'm at BuckeyeScoop.com. You can find me on my podcast, The Big Meat Kickoff, on all fine podcasting channels, including YouTube, Apple, iTunes, Spreaker, all that good stuff. On the same channel as this guy below me and a bunch of other shows.
Tony.
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman, and podcast is the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, available at all of your fine establishments.
And Steve.
Yep, bucknuts.com is our site, and at Steve Hellwagon on Twitter. That's where you usually find me. And not much going on this week. Still digging out from spring football and just taking it from there.
And thank you, everyone out there who contributed, everybody that watched and liked the video. Of course, all of you, but specifically those that contributed. These guys have done this 155 consecutive weeks. You see their Twitter handles there. It'll be a good ride for you to follow them on Twitter and check in on what they have to say day to day on the Buckeyes and other things as well. Appreciate you all being here, and we will be back next Wednesday, hopefully, but that's why you hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. So we'll see you next week.